Welcome to Rugby. I'm Alex Simmons, joined once again by my partner in crime, Jamie Jones-Buchanan, and a man who's inspired our journey. He's been a regular throughout our years, 8 years now. John's going to our 9th year.
And a fountain of knowledge.
Amazing.
Well.
Brian Noble, Nobby, welcome.
Oh, I'm not sure I can live up to that introduction. A fountain of knowledge, I've never been called that.
But you're a fountain of stories, without a doubt. I love how you tell stories, and you've had such a fantastic career.
Yeah.
It's not over yet, though, because you're not in the game right now, but you want to get back in the game.
Well, I still feel like I'm in the game.
Yeah.
I like to influence people, and I like to tell people how great our game is. And when I bump into people, I certainly offer my opinion. Jamie will tell you that. A little bit like a panther prowling at the moment. There's something out there for me. I've spoken to a few people.
What would you like? Ideal job. Ideal job.
Well, they're not going to put my face on a £5 note or make me king of the world, so I suppose I'm going to have to stick with rugby league. The ideal job.
Is it head coach? Is it director of rugby? Is it a assistant coach? Well, how do you see it now?
Yeah, I've kind of dabbled into that administrative side, on the director side of things, and I think I understand what a good rugby club looks like, rugby league club. And so I like to influence people there. I've got an idea on recruitment. I think if you look at me 20 years and I was doing it, I picked some. I never talk about the bad ones I picked, so none of us do. But yes, I've waffled away for a long time. I'm still in. I can do pretty much, but soon I will make a decision. There's no doubt about that.
I remember when I was coming to the back end of my career, and I had a role at Leeds with sort of multiple facets, and then somebody said, do you fancy just doing coaching? Do you want to invest all your time and energy? And that 80-hour week quote came from you, kept ringing it back in my mind. Thinking, what's he doing for 80 hours? Yeah. Like, is that what you've got to do? And I understand that now, some of the video and the process, and some of the whole, when you've got 30 players to manage, is difficult. But if you was to flick back at some of your happiest memories in either administration or coaching, when and where would they be?
Oh, great question. I've always enjoyed it. The players do it for me. Yeah. So all the and then it's the support staff and the office staff and then the fans. It's just it's that communal thing. It's the whole thing. When you get something good on a week, trust me, when you get it wrong, it's pretty tough because the same people ask questions of you. But I've had some unbelievable. Every job at Bradford, pretty much. Whilst we created a real good dynasty, it was already created. I was lucky that I was an apprentice under Brian Smith and Matty Elliott, which gave me the ability to go on and probably paint the bridge. Yep. So I've been to a few places where we've had to build the bridge as well. So when people own clubs look at what's the issue with their club, they've really got to decide what kind of person they want in there to fix it. I loved Wigan. I loved Bradford, clearly. Do you know what? North Wales Crusaders, which started off as South Wales Crusaders. If we talk about stories, there's so much rubbish in this head. What an adventure that was for 18 months. I fully believed in that. We created such a momentum there, and sadly that fell by the way. And then you go on to Salford was, hopefully, some of the owners might think differently. I never left the joint in a worse place than when I went in there. And, Toronto particularly has been an ambition of mine, as you both know, for the last 5 years. And you mentioned stories. Some of the stories, gosh, I just a lucky man.
Give us a few standouts. So I always believe your gut tells you what you want to know straight away. Yeah. So off the top of your head, give us a few players who you've had over the years who stand out to you as either a great people, great players, or just absolute head the balls who just make you laugh when you think about them. So just off the top of your head, give us a few. Right,
got you. I started at Bradford Northern at 78, 79, and I was a really lucky man. My debut at Fartown, there were people. Neil Fox was in the back row, a legend of the game. I passed the ball to Neil Fox. I tell everybody, when they're throwing out legends, I said, hang on a minute, I used to pass the ball to Neil Fox, and it was only for one game with my debut at Fartown as a 17-year-old. Ellery Hanley stands out because I signed the same day as him and Henderson Gill, on a Tuesday night, a cold Tuesday night in Bradford as 16-year-olds, the three of us signed. So I remember with Gilly, we used to go to Yorkshire training together, which was in Castleford. And we used to pick him up at Huddersfield. Me, Ellery and Henderson was travelling the same car. And we came out of Huddersfield, and clearly you go over the River Calder. And so we're going to Cass, and the River Calder's there as well. So I wind Gilly up about this all the time. So we sat there, he says, man, he says, 2 River Colders. What did he say? He said, 2 River Colders. I said, it's the same one. He goes, there's no river that big in the world. So I knew for a start that I was involved with such great people. But when you look at the debut, Jimmy Thompson was in the front row. Colin Forsyth, Ian Van Bellen, a giant of a man. I don't know if you've seen pictures of him. And Keith Bridges and Jimmy were my mentors. I never got bashed. In an era when young kids used to get bashed, because like those old blokes didn't want to give their places up, when you used to get bashed, I never got bashed. I was looked after. So Len Casey was in the back row with Neil Ford. They were giants of men. Literally, I had a bad neck just looking at the size of these people. So maybe subliminally, that's my love for big people. You know, I used to always like big teams. Probably came from that. But my playing era was special. I had a halfback that I played with called Paul Harkin. Dave Hobbs was probably my best mate within the game. You know, his iconic Wembley appearances he actually knocked Bradford Northern out in the semi, and he was a mate of mine. Kelvin Skerritt and Carl Fairbank were 2 of the younger guns that I helped bring through the Bradford system, but were they mad? Probably were mad. You know, like Carl Fairbank was a farmer from Elland, and his tackle technique was just to whack people here. And they used to drop like a brick, and I remember once playing with, so the humour in the game I've always been akin to, and everybody looks at the dark side. We used to have a drink together afterwards. We once, Brendan Hill, who was a 20-stone front row, who would be an icon now.
Legend, bloke.
An icon,
Legend.
And a lovely fella. What a man, what a player as well.
Yeah.
Like his 100 metres was something crazy, like. For a 20-stone bloke, I remember him once, we played in a final and he went 80 metres, and everybody just stopped and went, how could something that big go that quick? He was unbelievable, but we used to torment people. So he was a plumber, or he worked for a plumbing industry, and he used to bring his toiletries and pots and baths, and so we emptied the whole of the back of his lorry and hid it behind the Standouts. So it just took us 3 hours just to empty it and carry it around there. And he come back and reported to the police that all his stuff had been nicked. So yeah, Paul Harkin was probably the funniest because master tactician. He came from an era when halfbacks didn't make tackles. Right. So he used to bring a piece of paper out. If somebody pointed out he missed a tackle, it's in my contract. I don't have to make any tackles. That's your job. So everybody had their jobs. And I remember playing at Wigan in an era when it was hard work just to get to the other end of the field. It's driving rain, and we're playing in the Challenge Cup quarter-final. Might have been the round before the 6th round. And we've got to their end of the field. It's taken us 25 minutes to get to their end of the field. And he drops a goal. And it was an era of, do you remember TV, Yorkshire Television used to do Scrum Down or something like that, yeah. With John Helm, bless him. And it was Scrum Down. And it's like, nobody's got a point. He drops a goal, and everybody's gone, what have you done? And he's running back like this. He says, my mum's watching on telly. So, anyway, we lost 3-2 that game. We'd have dropped another goal, and they got a drop kick and a goal. It was an end-to-end classic, as you'd imagine, in the rain, but brilliant characters. You know, like Skerritts and the Fairbanks and the Hobbses, and, you know, I toured with Dave and Paul Harkins. We used to have a blast, absolute blast.
Let me pull a few things that you've mentioned together there. You mentioned giants and this love for big people, big players.
Yeah.
And dynasty as well, thinking about Bradford. Now, I remember when I was a kid, getting to sort of mid to late teens, I was playing for Yorkshire, and Dennis Price, who was Leon Price's dad, was coach, and he took us to Odsall for a bit of a treat, and we went, and I'm sure you yourself took us round, showed us a gym, and then took us on to look at a video that you'd reviewed from a reserve grade, and you were sort of telling us what we expected from players, and I remember being blown away at, oh, this guy's missed a tackle because of this, and never really understood the game to that level, obviously. But I had this aspiration to want to be a professional player. And I'll never forget, he said, we get young lads, we'll get them in the gym and we make them have big glutes, big quads, we want them really big. And it don't look, I'll never forget the phrase, it don't look good on the beach, but it'll make you a good rugby player. Yeah. And I thought, right, that's the way to go. Now, Bradford were always renowned for not signing players under 6 foot and wanting giant players, and it was a philosophy that ultimately led to a dynasty, because by the time that philosophy had come to fruition, you're talking about the early 90s and late 90s, where you've got the awesome foursome Bradford Bulls side.
And two props on the wings as well.
Exactly, and it was horrendous to play against. You know, when I look back at, there's 2 teams, the Saints of 06, and then the Bradford Bulls side as well, unbelievable. But that sort of dynasty, that philosophy, how come it's never sort of been replicated or done again? Or what was the philosophical thinking behind it at that time?
Well, I think I suppose it came from Brian Smith. You know, a good big un will always beat a good little un, is the theory.
Yeah.
There were exceptions to the rule. If you're shorter, you could be quick. Because I also believed in speed and pace are the difference at the highest level. And people used to say, "How do you make him so big?" And I said, "Well, we sign him big. He helps, you know." So if you got Jamie Peacock, I'll use an example. Stuart Fielden weren't the size they were when they came into the system, but became quite strong and quite large and athletic. That's what people miss. They think you just sign giants and this, and they've got to be able to play rugby as well. So the other criteria that you probably didn't pick up on was that they had to be able to play or have the ability to play. And so our skills program was really, really stringent as well in what they could and couldn't do. Like if you look at, I'll use Joe Vagana as an example. We signed him. He could have played halfback. He was such a skilled. And when we see the game now, it progresses, and the front rowers have. Most players having to have an element of skill. That came from that era, you know. It came from that era that Tony Smith and Brian Smith and that kind of upskilling of everybody that we'd lost came through. Yeah. But the size aspect was, it's really, really handy. But if you could play and you were quick and you were mobile as well, we took that on board too. So it wasn't just about size, but I tell you what, it was really handy because people used to accuse a lot of the teams of just plan A. Well, we never had to go to plan B. We had plan Bs and plan Cs and plan Ds. You know, you have to look at, if you look at the game now, the 6 again rule, if you don't accommodate the 6 again rule, you go backwards. So you have to keep up with trends as well. And did they catch up on us? No, not really, because I still think it's a challenge now for big players in the game. Yes. They have to be different, you know, because they're picked on in the main. And one of my worries is that we lose. I mean, you look at Alex Walmsley. Who wouldn't watch 13 Alex Walmsleys on a field? Well, who wouldn't? Yeah. You know, your speed and athleticism that you had in the game, you know, who wouldn't want to watch that? I think it's you I'm talking about, Jamie. You know what I'm saying? So there's room for everybody. Yeah. You know, the halfbacks, the small blokes, have always had a challenge. When you got 20-stone bloke running at you, you have to have a strategy. Yeah. Now, that's a coach can help you there, but like Paul Harkin in his era, he ran the team and he didn't make tackles. And he used to tell everybody else, I don't make tackles, that's your job. There used to be a position called a bobby, which was just scouting around the back of the line, and all it was not making any tackles. That's the truth of it. You say tactical. In Australia, they had it tactically. They used to go fill a position where they thought they were weak. They got our halfbacks, no chance. There's no way. I played with some of them. Andy Gregory was an unbelievable friend of mine and a great, great player. He wouldn't want to make a tackle if you wanted him to. I look at Tommy Lulu, who had the privilege to coach him. If you run at him, he belts the absolute snot out of you. He can hit, you know. So we came into an era then when halfbacks could make tackles. So it's a long answer to your question, Jamie, but yeah, big ones are good if they're mobile and they can play. But
when we were kids, you used to talk about shirt grabbers, so you used to grab shirts. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And all these little phrases. But I don't know if I'm right or not, but I think Bradford must have been one of the first teams to go skin tight vest, so you couldn't grab shirts anymore.
I remember it, and it was in either a Yorkshire Cup final or we played Hunslet in a Challenge Cup game. And it was Matty Elliott. He brought in skin-tight jumpers. Well, there's still some all shapes and sizes then, so there were bulges and bumps. But they could prove it. I remember that the amount of people, footage that we got, and this is where crazy folk are the right folk. You should listen to people. Yes. Mate, if we give you skin-tight jumpers, I think that came from the NFL because they'd gone into skin-tight jumpers, and we could actually prove it. We used to see people grabbing on and losing shirts. People were shirt grabbers, literally. Yeah. And so that innovation in the game, if you like, I think Dave Brailsford it calls them 1%ers. Yeah. Yep. That 1%er probably won us and scored us more tries than anything else.
Yeah. Absolutely outstanding. Let's go now. It's been a great intro to the show. Over to see the man himself, Tom Lynham, and as he gives us a story that you might have seen rugby in before. Check this out, Bedtime Stories.
Hi, I'm Tommy Lynham, and here is this week's Bedtime Story. Sympathy for the devil. Over many years, the devil was seen as an outcast, persecuted and mocked by its fellow peers as it struggled to adapt to the ever-changing game of rugby league. As Saints soared to the highest of heights, Rhinos charged to the front line and Warriors fought tooth and nail to become number one. The devil remained in its slowly benign condition. Even as its stature grew, a new home that made many of us jealous, it still remained the outcast, not reaching these goals that only the best could achieve. Whenever they felt they could close the gap on the big boys, they would be left defeated and demoralised. Things had to change. And that change came when a member of the old guard came down to oversee his downbeat group of Reds and bring his charismatic and uplifting style to the players in its city. Born of that land, he knew the club so well. He knew what it would take for them to reach their goals, become a serious contender in the sport, and hopefully one day challenge for the almighty crown of League Champions. He re-energised and rejuvenated the group of Devils. He taught them well and he taught them wise. During the year of 2018, a young Devil made his way to the city from across the other side of the world. He was young and exciting, and he didn't know it yet, but this young Devil would change the fortunes of this team and the city for good. And so with renewed confidence and vigour, the Devils made a play to become something more in that season. They knew they had the guts and the heart to fight each and every team for that coveted trophy. Season's best finish led them to have a chance of making it to the Holy Grail, right on their doorstep. Many still believe them a trivial opponent, a side not worth their salt to be facing such experience and might. But once again they defied the critics and slayed the Tigers with consummate ease, a resolute defence keeping their opposition from scoring a single point. They had one final game before they reached the Theatre of Dreams, a game against a group of warriors who had the greatest history of any team in the land. The Devils would need to go above and beyond what they thought they could achieve if they were to be victorious. They dismantled a team that had overcome weeks before and had finally made it to their first ever final. So it would be the Devil versus the Saints. A great achievement had already been made by the Devils to reach this promised land, but they didn't want to leave empty-handed. They wanted to leave as champions. They fought and battled hard for 80 minutes against the heavily favoured Saints. In the end, it would prove too much for the Devils, but they left that night as equals.
Absolutely outstanding, that Jones's sympathy for the Devil.
Yeah, a bit of a play on words. Brian just telling us there, it's a song.
It's a Stone song.
Yeah.
Iconic Stone song. Mick Jagger will love this feature.
I never knew. It was obviously a story about Salford making the first grand final, which is poignant because they're back in the Challenge Cup.
Yes, this weekend.
Which is
against you boys.
A great achievement as well. Both teams who were underdogs getting the win on the weekend, I think. Brian, did
you consider Leeds being the underdogs?
Well, listen, only from a bookie's point of view. I'm not. Obviously trying to be
There's a bit
objective.
too much talent. I certainly didn't have you down as that. A bit too much talent in your team, but I did think we're going to go a lot closer. So I think it's testament to how Leeds played and the conditions, particularly, and Luke Gale's performance. I thought it's like going back to the 80s when it always rained and you had to have somebody that could kick a ball down the other end of the field.
Call it now. Who's going to win this weekend? Challenge
right,
Cup.
here's my go on it.
Right.
I think Leeds will win.
Ooh.
And I'll tell you why I think, but do you know what, having said that now, Salford people and Ian Watson and Paul Rowley are all thinking, yeah, what does he know? We are the original scrapyard dogs. They ain't going to go away. I think if you don't put with teams like Salford who are good teams, and if you don't put your foot on their throat and keep it there, and you let the pressure off one little bit, they'll get you, promise you. So they're every chance, Salford.
Of all the experiences you've had, Nobby, Challenge Cup finals, Grand Finals, World Club Challenge, is there any night before team talk, one of those moments where you know you've absolutely cracked it and you just get that sense and belief that you're just not going to lose that game? Everybody's there to make those dummy half tackles if they need to.
Yeah, if the team was ready, I wasn't one for big night, but for big occasions, I probably used to get the team together, right. Me and the team and the staff, nobody else, and put them in a big circle. So and I'd individually go around each player, tell them how good they were or what I thought about what they were and what they weren't. And I did that with Bradford on many occasions, and poor Lee Radford at the end used to get, and we got Lee Radford. And we got Lee Radford because he was 17th, because I used to go through these Vaganas and Fieldens and Peacock, who were all of these people, Deacons and Robbie Pauls and Henry when I was there. I met, you know, New Zealand and that. What have you got to be? Yeah, of course, if we're the overdogs, then let's carry that title into this. Let's play the way we can play. I won't be brilliant, but I want you to get somewhere near where you can be. But yeah, I used to like a Friday night talk before a Saturday. Yeah, if I thought the team was ready, I'd probably leave them alone. It all depends what kind of team you've got.
Yeah.
If you've got some senior blokes in your team, you leave it to them. In the main, you just tip them up. Yeah. So I'm saying, mate, you need to have a word with such and such. He's looking a bit. And here's the antidote to that. The Challenge Cup final that we played in against St Helens was the best we'd ever prepared. Ever. The one that was at Twickenham when it was a bit raining and drizzling, and I remember one of the Bradford fans said, "I was such a miserable day." It was raining, we got beat by Saints, and my programme fell in the water. It was just the best we'd ever prepared, bar none. It was the year Henry was there, so it must have been 2001 or so. I thought we were going to win by 60. I saw him in the tunnel, and I've got this picture on my wall at home to this day of them in the tunnel, and they were like this. They were so ready, they were that tense, it got too much for them. And I hadn't taken the pressure away from them. So I consider that was my fault. I've got that picture in my wall at home, understanding that if you get it wrong, you know, the dejection after the game of what was such a good team. And then we went to a grand final later in the year, the same year. And so I had to get the players in they were playing cards. On the you know, they do a big stage on the grand final stage. Then they had sort of band. Then they put it in the stands now, but they had a band there, and people like Michael Withers and Rennie and they were all playing cards, and I had to actually bring them into the changing room to get ready to play the game. They were that relaxed, you know, and I was still worried in the back of your mind, thinking you might have gone a bit too far here with your relaxation principles here, Bri. But they were absolutely ready to play. You know, even if we'd have got beat, I couldn't have criticised the way they prepared for that one. But the tenseness and the intensity of getting absolutely everything right for the final, I'd got wrong. I thought we were the most ready we'd ever be. I learned a massive lesson that day.
Some gold information right there.
Gold for you,
Why do you think we invited him on this week?
Right, that's an epic first half. Keep it locked right here on Free Sports for more in part 2. And to go into the break, we've got the very first of our gratitude videos from Rugby League Cares featuring the one and only Emily Rudge. Keep it locked, we'll see you after the break.
Dear Mum and Dad, I am writing you both this letter because I want you to know that I feel so privileged to have you two as my parents. I have two people in my corner who will do anything and everything to help me succeed in my life.
This was under 11s, this is Woolston, this is where it really all started. This is where I think she scored her first try in that bottom corner. That was when a scrum cap came off and a ponytail fell out, and they all couldn't believe that the girl had scored against him.
You know, you don't often get to say all them things to your Mum and Dad, and it was emotional, but I quite enjoyed writing it and getting them things down on paper.
Dad, you are the one who really helped start all of this for me, and I've stood by me ever since. From taking me to that first ever training session to the moment I walked out leading my country as a captain of England women. You have been the biggest influence in my career, and without you, your sport and dedication, I would not be where I am today.
Oh gosh.
Says Mum.
Mum, you are one of the most hard-working people I know, and you have taught me to be the same. You never shy away from a challenge, and you inspire me to follow in your footsteps as a strong and powerful woman. I love you both so much and will never be able to thank you enough for all you have done for me. All my love, Em.
Lovely, isn't it? It's great.
I need a tissue now.